to a certain extent, a war that has changed and has shaped and continues to shape the United States today. Okay. How so? After the Spanish-American War, the United States gained overseas territory. Among the overseas territories that the United States gained was Puerto Rico. Today, Puerto Rico is a U.S. possession, and people that live in Puerto Rico are both citizens of the island and citizens of the United States. So to that extent, it continues to shape the United States. But in essence, this period of time, as we just finished talking about, is marked by imperialism. Imperialism is a fancy word that means empire building. Nations were beginning to grow. How do nations grow? To a certain extent, the same way, and I think that this is a very good mental picture, the same way as a cell. One cell approaches another and it annexes the other, and the two cells become one cell. Generally, in nations, the larger government takes over the smaller government. We are beginning to see a little bit of that in Croatia today. Okay. You see that Russia is trying to annex some of their smaller, less powerful neighbors to become bigger. Okay, to become bigger. So, this is what we're going to be talking about. Now, how did it all start? It all started in a very interesting way. You already know about the muckrakers. Okay? You already know that journalists were putting out information out there, and part of what they were doing is that they were causing people to react. But journalism, during this period of time, really meant newspaper writers. And you've already learned that some newspapers were trying to sell more newspapers, and one of the things that they did was they would include what in the newspapers? Something that we did outside, yes?
Colored comics.
Yeah, they included political cartoons and colored comics, because newspapers, like every other business, are in competition with each other to sell more newspapers. And this time was great for them. Let me explain to you what was happening. Spain and Cuba are undergoing what really was very common, and a colonial country is trying to push off their colonial masters. Who was the colonial master of the United States?
George Washington.
Who was the colonial master of the United States? England. England was the colonial master of the United States. The United States, because of the way and the conditions that existed, waged a revolution and pushed off England. And many of the countries in the American continent are doing just that. Cuba is just the latest one. Now, Cuba had waged a couple of revolutions that really hadn't worked. As a matter of fact, the leaders of this Cuban revolution were all over the place. There were some in the Dominican Republic, there were some in New York City, there were others in Cuba. So they were all over the place. And they ultimately decide again to wage another revolution, probably not thinking that it was going to be successful. They then begin the planning phase, and the revolution begins. The United States really doesn't have any issue with Spain or with Cuba. They should, in essence, be in standby. But now comes the newspapers. Okay, stop.